In the words of a very dear soul that I connected with this year, you are worth the time it takes. We always begin with gratitude, so I want to thank you for being here and let you know that I am so very honored to have your energy and your presence here in this space. Peace. If you are new here, I am LA licensed therapist, holistic wellness coach and guide, and the creator of this channel, Reconnect with You. I want to talk to y'all today about taking the time that you need before responding. I'm going to start by sharing just some very real life examples of how this might show up for you, provide you some guidance around language to use, and also offer you what I have found to be a very helpful resource. So I want to talk about this first using an example from my personal life and personal journey. This happened a little while back, but it came to mind for me as I was preparing for and thinking about what I wanted to focus on and talk to y'all about. But I was hired as a speaker for a big event, and during one of our planning calls, as we were just pulling everything together and figuring out the logistics, they asked me about my rate, about my pricing, what was the fee for this service that I was offering them. And I had done all of the preparation and the reflection just in terms of figuring out all of the costs associated on my end in terms of travel, lodging, and things like that, and also thinking about how much time and effort and energy I was going to be putting into actually prepping for my talk and to speak to the group. And so I had done all of the preparation and reflection on my end, and I had come up with a number even before I had spoken to them during this meeting. But for some reason, when they asked me about my rate or my fee, I immediately just threw out a number. And granted, it wasn't a random number. It was the number of what my previous rate or fee was. And this was towards the end of our call. So luckily we were wrapping up and I was going to have some time to really sit with myself. And what came up for me was I was so disappointed in myself for the fact that I literally immediately after they asked me this question, I responded right away. I didn't even pause. I remember I responded right away. I didn't pause. I didn't think about it. I just kind of blurted out this answer. And I was really disappointed in myself because at that point in my life, I had a practice around pausing and seeing the value in pausing, taking a moment to take a break, sitting in stillness. All of that was important to me at that time. It's even more so important now. But at that time, I had a practice of pausing. So I was disappointed in the fact that I had not paused to reflect before responding. And I had left a lot of money on the table. There was a lot of, when I think about the number that I had given them and the number that was reflected in my own planning, just in terms of what was reasonable and just in alignment with what it was I was offering, the value of it. And so I had left a lot of money on the table. And what came up in my reflection after this meeting, I was disappointed in myself. And I also thought about why did I do that? Why didn't I pause like I typically do? Why didn't I pause before responding and throwing this number out? And what I came up with was that I was excited. I was just kind of in the moment. I remember being really confident in that meeting, and I was kind of in my element too. So I was really excited to talk to them, excited about this opportunity. And that excitement led me to be really excited to respond to their prompt around well, what's your fee or your rate? So that's the first example that I want to offer. And luckily in that situation, I was able to follow up with them and just share that I I don't even remember what all I put in the email, but I did share with them what the end result was that this is actually the rate that I intended to share with you. And they were luckily for me, they were understanding, they were open and amenable to my updated rate, the actual rate that I had come up with. But that was a really big lesson for me, and just the importance of pausing, especially before responding to inquiries, even as it relates to business. I'm going to talk about some other examples here in a second. But just the importance of pausing, even if for just a few seconds. And I know when you are in your flow, especially when it comes to work stuff, you can be really on the go, jumping from task to task and being very task oriented and being excited, hopefully, about your work. But even in those moments, even if it's just 3 seconds, taking a moment to pause. The next example that I want to offer you and share with you is not so much a specific example, but I think one that comes up for a lot of us. And this is as it relates to responding to emails. Or responding to correspondence emails. I'm going to put both of those in the same category. But responding to correspondence, there might be requests that come to your inbox, emails that you need to respond to, folks, wanting to hire you or work with you, learn from you in some way, or just maybe needing something from you. Maybe y'all are working on a project together, or they've assigned something to you and you need to get back to them on something. I don't know who created this standard, or the standard around this practice, and decided that this was the standard, but the expectation that folks reply to emails within 24 to 48 hours. And I paused because I realized I said that wrong. My question was, who created this practice and then decided that it was the standard? But what I'm referring to again is responding to emails within 24 to 48 hours. And on one hand, I understand that it's helpful to have some type of standard or some guideline, so to speak, in terms of the amount of time it takes you to respond to correspondence. And it is not taking into consideration that different people may need different response times, or they may need more time to respond beyond 24 to 48 hours. I am one of those people. I do understand that there are some matters that may be more urgent when it comes to deadlines and things like that. And I would even argue, if you've watched some of my previous videos, I would even argue that even some of those deadlines can be flexible. I am all about getting out of this sense of urgency. And I have had many personal experiences and have also sat with clients that were really impulsive in their response and responded in a way that they did not feel good about because of that urgency, which is one of the many reasons why I'm talking about this and the importance of pausing. I want to share with you, and I have it written here just a little bit from my out of office message, even though I don't label it as out of office. Sometimes I'll say I'm resting. I'll say at a silent meditation retreat. I actually just had a message last week actually, and I said I am honoring grief or holding space for grief, something like that as the subject. But I say here, I will be slowly transitioning back into work on this date, and will begin to respond to messages then as my time and energy allow. And I think that's so revolutionary that I have that, and I feel good about it. I feel like it's me. It feels very much in alignment with what I've been talking to y'all about, excuse me, in terms of really getting out of the sense of urgency, being unrushed, and also taking care of yourself, caring for your nervous system as you are balancing and managing all of these different things. And so I wanted to share that with y'all just as a template a template if you wanted to use that and update your own out of office message. I also have a message in the body of my email, or I should say the signature, where I mention and state very explicitly I no longer subscribe to grind culture, to hustle culture, which means that I'm rephrasing it because I don't have it up in front of me, but this means that I may take a little bit longer to respond. This means that I could be resting. This means that I'm taking care of myself. But I want the message behind, or the idea I should say behind this message in my signature, is that I want you to know that your message is important to me. And I want you to know that when I do respond, I am responding in a very thoughtful way. And I'm responding after I've taken the necessary care of myself. So that's the second example that I want to offer you, is just responding to correspondence, getting back to people. I also want to throw text messages in there, because sometimes it may not come in your email, it may come from a text message. But I did do a little bit of research after my last video, which is included in the description box. But after my last video, I realized how fun it was to really explore and look into a lot of these things, these rules and these norms and these guidelines that a lot of people are really strict about and follow, but that we don't know, or I should say I don't know, and maybe some other people don't know, where did this come from? Why do we do this? And questioning that, because some of these things just don't make sense. I don't believe in there being this one way of doing things in terms of, oh, well, everyone needs to respond to emails within 24 to 48 hours, because that may not work well for everyone. And so I did look into it in terms of doing research on like who created this rule and why do we follow it. And I wasn't able to find much. It was almost the only thing that I found was 24 to 48 hours is a reasonable response, or an appropriate response. Those were labels, reasonable and appropriate. Those were labels that I saw, and it's like, again, who came up with that? Who decided that? And reasonable for who? But I won't go too much into that. But I did want to let y'all know that I looked into it and couldn't really find much of anything. The third example that I want to offer you that came up for me was just as it relates to possibly needing to postpone a conversation, or not being ready to have a particular conversation, being invited into a space to have a dialogue or a conversation with someone or with a group of people, and maybe not being ready to do that. And what comes to mind for me, there are several conversations, some of which I have not even had yet, speaking very transparently and openly. Some I haven't had yet because I was not ready to have those conversations. I did not feel like the environment supported me in being able to have those conversations in a meaningful and productive and effective way. And so I'm recalling there's a personal conversation that I had with a friend that took me weeks to be ready to come to the table and discuss. And that may, for some folks that are listening, that may seem like an excessive amount of time. And I was thinking about coming to that conversation and also balancing everything else that I had going on in my life. And that's not necessarily an excuse. This conversation was important to me, but it was also one that I knew needed to be had from a very grounded and centered and an intentional place. And you can't do those things when you're rushing, when you are trying to just check something off and get something over with. And in fact, it can have the opposite effect, where you come to the conversation, you have the conversation, but it doesn't go well because maybe you didn't take the needed time to think about the things that you wanted to say, to reflect on the questions that you wanted to ask, to really make sure that that conversation was meaningful. And the important thing with conversations and with correspondence, I think too, and I'm gonna say broadly in communication, is to remember that once you say something, once you put something in writing, there is no taking it back. It's been released, it is out there. And I'm not saying that to scare you, but I'm saying that to highlight even more the importance of taking the time that you need to respond to whatever it is. And as it relates to personal conversations like the one that I mentioned, you have to allow things to unfold in an organic way, and for folks to evolve into the version of themselves that they need to be able to have that conversation. And I bring that up second because sometimes that is the case. Sometimes it is, I can't have this conversation with you right now because I know you're not ready. Or I assume, right? I'm going to say I assume because, and maybe you do know, but I'm going to use a more appropriate term. I suspect that you are not ready to have this conversation. And so, and again, these are not things that you have to communicate to the other person. This can be your inner conversation with yourself, but it is important to acknowledge. And I wanted to bring that up because the part about not being ready to have a personal conversation for weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years, because I want to normalize that. It's a very real thing. And there are many times things that are revealed to us over time that you need before going into that conversation. So I wanted to offer personal conversations as another example of this, to give you some guided language. If you are watching this video and you know that you have an email that you need to respond to, or a text message, or a conversation that needs to be had, but something that you know you need to respond to or communicate about that you are not ready for, I want to offer you 3 phrases that you can use. The first one is, I am not sure how I feel about that. Let me sit with it. This is communicating that you've received the message or the correspondence or whatever the case is, the request, and you are unsure about how you feel and you need some time to sit with it. The second example that I want to give to you is, I don't know what to say. I'll need some time to process. You're letting them know that you are without words. You're not really sure how to respond, and you are setting what I'm going to call a silent boundary. You're communicating to them that I don't know what to say, so I'm not going to say anything. That doesn't mean that you don't communicate this to them, but I'm not going to respond in a moment or at a time when I don't know what to say. The third example that I want to give to you, and I think this is my favorite, is I want to respond thoughtfully. So I'll follow up with you once I've had some time to reflect. You are communicating to them that it's important to you to show up to that conversation or that correspondence or text message, whatever, from a thoughtful place. And you're letting them know, hey, give me some time. I'm going to follow up with you. One other caveat I want to mention that I think is relevant here and kind of goes back to what I mentioned about personal conversations is this idea of giving folks a timeline. Communicating, so saying, it's one thing to say, well, I'm not ready, or I don't know what to say, but also to, there may be an expectation on the other end that, well, if you're not ready now, when will you be ready? When can I expect to hear back from you? Which is a really common question. And I want to say one thing about that, and I think it's tricky and it's complicated. I think when it comes to more clear-cut things in work, in business, as it relates to tasks and working on projects with folks, I think it's a lot easier to say, oh, well, I don't have this now, but I'll have it for you next week, or I'll be ready to talk to you about this next week or in 2 weeks. When it comes to personal matters, it's a lot more tricky because I have been in conversations with clients and have also sat with myself and have admitted, I don't know when I'm going to be ready. I know I'm not ready now, but I'm not sure when I'm going to be ready. To satisfy your question about when we're going to have the conversation, I could just tell you, well, next month or next week. but I'm not sure that that accurately reflects the space that I'm going to be in. So I wanted to name that as tricky and it's complicated because there are instances where it may be difficult for you to give that person a timeline. And I don't have any other guidance for that. I think one thing that I will share as an alternative is to say, let's revisit, or let's check back in, or circle back. Let's circle back in 2 weeks, which gives you some time to reflect. It also, in some ways, may satisfy this other person in terms of a timeline, but you're still not committing to something that you don't know you'll be ready for at that time. So that's what I'll offer you. Just to summarize, taking time that you need before responding or communicating about something, it really ensures that you can respond tactfully, that you can respond thoughtfully, and more important, honestly. This is a practice that helps you to use your voice in a more empowered way, and also it decreases the likelihood that you're going to have the regret that I talked about earlier in the first example, that you're going to have regret, or that you are going to feel guilt about something that you said or how you communicated something. By pausing before you respond, you are really building this trust in yourself and being able to say to yourself, when I say something or when I'm responding to something, I've done the needed reflection and can therefore feel good about how I'm showing up in this conversation or this email or this text message, whatever the case. I want to offer you a resource, and I am realizing as I'm talking about this resource that I do not have it here in front of me, but I do remember the name. But I want to offer you an important resource, and it's a book. It is one of the best books that I have ever read, and I've read a lot of books. It's one of the best books I've ever read. And I'm going to replace best with most helpful. It's been one of the most helpful guides for me in communication and in conversations. And that book is called Difficult Conversations. And I would have loved to have the book here in front of me to share with y'all the author's names, but I'll make sure I drop that in the description of this video below for you to check it there. But the book is called Difficult Conversations. Please check that out if you want just some more tips and tools and guidance on having conversations. But again, it's called Difficult Conversations. A really big part of what we are doing here at Reconnect with You, and not just reconnect with you in terms of my business and my practice, but also here on this channel, is becoming more aware of ourselves, more aware of our reactions, and making a conscious decision to show up differently based on whatever that reflection is. I am your companion and your guide on this journey, but I'm not perfect. So I want to just thank you for being here. Thank you for your trust and being open to hearing and receiving these messages. Well, that is all that I have for y'all for today. Ooh, that is not all I have for y'all for today. I have a prompt for y'all. And this is the beauty of me committing to posting unedited videos, because you get to see my processing and some of my reflection and my mistakes, but this is real, this is authentic. In terms of a prompt for today around taking the time that you need before responding, I want you to think about a time when you responded to something and did not pause. So identify a time is the first part of the prompt. The second part of it is I want you to think about how it made you feel as you were reflecting or thinking about that time that you, similar to maybe what I shared in my first example, but a time when you responded without pausing, and maybe in a way where you said to yourself, well, that's not what I wanted to actually say, or I just responded quickly because they needed a response from me. I want you to think about what feelings came up for you. Some that I named from my response were guilt and also shame. So that's the second part of the prompts. Think about how it made you feel. The third and last part of this prompt is, what might you want to do differently next time? What does pausing look like for you more specifically? So that is the prompt for y'all from today's video. Now, for real, that is what I have for y'all for today. I look forward to connecting with y'all again soon. But in the meantime, reconnect with you. Peace and love, y'all.